I had the pleasure of meeting Marc Angelos at the CEX event where I gave a presentation in Scottsdale Mark, I want to say several months ago, but it's been probably 6, 7 months ago, right?
Getting to be a while.
And Marc had the pleasure of meeting my wife and my son Garrett, who I co-founded Maneuver with. And he's just one of those guys where immediately when I met Marc, I was blown away with his professionalism, with his enthusiasm, with his intelligence, with his, he really made me feel like he was listening to what I had to say while we were having our one-on-one conversations. And frankly, when we walked back up to the hotel room, Marc, after the first night of the meet and greet before the event formally started, your name is the name that came up where Garrett and Lisa were like, did you guys meet Marc? What an amazing human being. And so, Marc, you stood out immediately to me and my family, and that's why I have Marc on today, everyone. He brings 30 years of sales experience from the FinTech side of capital markets on Wall Street. His firm helps business owners convey value more effectively through content and social selling. Marc's all in on Web3, and so what we're going to talk about today is he's going to take bits and pieces of his 500 articles on selling products and services, on building brands, on sharing content that have appeared on CNBC, Bloomberg, Traders Magazine, Creator Economy Expo. He's going to take some of the several hundred video content talking points, most popular takes that we've all watched across LinkedIn, Instagram, Medium, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, and Discord, and bring it into today's conversation about marketing and branding and everything else in between when it comes to Web3. And so that's why Marc's here. Marc, I think a lot of people mistaken digital currency and NFTs for blockchain, smart contracts, Web3, and the metaverse. And the fact of the matter is, we're talking about a lot of different buckets and sandboxes. One may not necessarily have too much to do with the other. And so maybe start us off with, tell us a little bit more about who you are, what got you interested in Web3, and maybe distinguish between all of the news that we're reading about every day with respect to FTX and what has you and I interested in this space.
Sure. Well, number one, thank you for having me, Mitch. That was a very effusive and very generous intro. I appreciate that. The brief on me, 30 years on Wall Street. I come from the sales and trading background, New York City. So my background would be firms like Morgan Stanley, UBS, trading desks. And I was basically in charge of the algorithmic electronic trading software sales. So that's basically AI-based trading programs. From there, I launched a content marketing firm serving that space, the FinTech Web3 space, which, as you know, Mitch, very quickly became metaverse, blockchain. Everyone thinks, as you said, the crypto world is it. But really what we're interested in is the background infrastructure of the crypto and NFT world, blockchain. And so blockchain, in my opinion, transforms business in a way we haven't seen since the internet. And so right now I've done, we cross paths. I've done head of strategic partnerships for Joe Polizzi and the Tilt. I've done a lot of selling, but right now I'll boil those 500 articles down. I hashed out 6 steps, Mitch, which I thought would be very helpful for your audience. 6 things that people can do to market in Web3 versus, how it's different from Web2, the translation of that. To answer your question,
can I ask just real quick, when you say to market in Web3, maybe distinguish for our live and recorded viewers, when you use the term market, I know you're also referring to relationships and community as opposed to traditional marketing. Am I right or wrong about that?
Bang on, Mitch, as always, 100%. As everyone knows, relationships are the most powerful form of connection, and that all sales happens through a relationship of some type. When you're dealing a widget like a toothpaste, you don't need to know who made the toothpaste on Amazon. Colgate's great. But when you're dealing in big ticket items like real estate and commercial airlines and things like that, you need to know who's on the other end of this transaction. And that is the basis of Web3. It's a relationship based. The big difference I'll start off with, people should realize that when I say marketing, in the old days of Web2, that was consumer data and sales funnels and banging on people to buy things. That is not. The world has changed. Web3 marketing is based on customer experience and relationship. You actually know these people. So, Mitch, you and I are a good example, I would say. We didn't know each other. CEX happens at the Creator Economy Expo, and now we're close friends. So that's why I'm here today, and I was honored to be asked, and you've got a following that's going to follow you from Web 2 to Web 3 because of that. It's relationship. Tell me if I'm wrong. So
sorry about that. You are right. No, Mark, you're absolutely right. I had a hard time finding the unmute button, so I'm still figuring out Discord. But you're right. But we met at an event, CEX, that was primarily focused on Web3 technology, where Joe and Brian were sharing this new technology with a global audience in real life in Scottsdale who are more well known in the Web 2 worlds than the Web 3. So what we did is we rolled the dice. We all showed up at a new event talking about a new topic with really industry leaders from around the world. And that's how we met. We kind of rolled the dice, took a risk, and did some traveling during, COVID time, and the rest is history.
I'll make it quick for you, Mitch. The reason that you and I connected as we did is because we're both community-oriented folks, and this is not tooting horns. This is saying that approach attracts other people. Community begets the folks who want to make a community happen. That's why Joe Polizzi was able to do that, and Brian Clark. The problem is going to be in the modern business world. These companies need to learn that that's the next step. It's not as much building an audience; it's now building a community, and the difference being the amount of motivation these folks will have to follow, buy, do. It'll all come from how well they know, like, and trust you.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And so let's dive in and share with us what you feel we should be focusing on to do just that in a Web3 environment. And what I'd like to do, Mark, since we have a small community joining us live, is if you've got questions, we'll all figure this out, but just either raise your hand or unmute or wait until Mark or I pause and jump in, and we can just carry a conversation. I think Mark would be very comfortable with that. But Mark, the mic's all yours.
I appreciate that, Mitch. Thank you. Yes, by all means, questions are great. Guys, I'm frequently asked, and Mitch, you are too. I hear it in your lives. How do I apply that to my business? So I've tried to come up with a couple of tips and tricks to help anyone in any business. These are principles that will apply regardless. But by all means, raise your hand and interrupt if you need. As I mentioned, Web 2 is based on consumer data and sales funnels, right? So that's going to be, you basically would get a service in exchange for giving up your personal data. That's how the world used to work. The new world is going to work off of experiences. And by that, I mean, there's mechanisms that confuse people. We call them NFTs, Mitch, the metaverse itself. These are things that they're mechanisms by which you deliver a customer experience to the people that support what you're doing, right? So think about an elaborate experience that's rich in interaction. That is the core bedrock idea behind a Web3 community. And again, the Creator Economy Expo was a good example of that, Mitch. So it's not so much marketing anymore as creating the audience that knows and likes and trusts you. So how do we do that? I think step number one is you have to plant your flag. Mitch, you've done an excellent job illustrating this. You must become known as the expert in something specific. In your case, Mitch, it is the legal aspects of the metaverse. And what does this mean for business and the lawyer profession? And how do people get acclimated in a new world where the actual IP is digital? So this whole concept of planting your flag, people normally mistake it for the old world of networking. But networking is who you know. This is more about influence in who knows you, right? So I think it was Seth Godin who said you build awareness by having people enroll in a long-term marketing campaign, basically. What that means is they know what you're doing and where you're going. So Mitch, you've made it a mission, really, to educate people on the metaverse and how to operate within it. And you're not just preaching, you live it. You're doing it right now. And I think that helps establish this is where you plant your flag. And these are the people that want to learn this come to you. And everyone listening.
Mark, when we're learning these things, and I don't mean to be rude by interrupting, but I just want to probably ask.
Don't worry.
Yeah, we're good. Okay. So, but I make mistakes, Mark. I'm making public mistakes as an experienced trial lawyer with a certain brand. Just during this show, I'm trying to figure out how to unmute. I'm clicking some of the wrong buttons. Talk to us a little bit about how a understanding community doesn't hold that against you. I mean, we're all learning this together.
I think the difference, though, Mitch, is that you admit this, right? This is why people can't stand gurus. It's that you say, well, this is a public use case. I mean, you're making yourself the crash test dummy, if you will, on behalf of all of us. And I think folks are gracious and have gratitude for that. You are saying, we don't know. No one knows. I, Mitch, don't know. And so we're going to figure it out together. That's a very different message than you should do this, right? That we've all seen that one, the people yelling at us on YouTube. So I think that's rule number one. Be willing to admit you don't know, which you've clearly, you're comfortable doing. That requires a lack of ego, a humility that you do have, Mitch, and I can vouch because I've met you in person and I've seen it in action. A lot of folks, especially in the business world, have to struggle with this. It is required, if you want to build a community, to be part of that community and not lord it from above. I think that the other piece of that is being willing to make mistakes. As we all know, that's how you learn in life, right? Failure is the key to success. That's not acceptable in certain business circles, and I come from corporate finance, so I understand that. But the reality is, in real life, you learn by failing, and you figure out by course correction. So life is one big game of test and iterate, and if you're open to people and let them know, there's no issue there. So I think you do a great job of that, Mitch.
I love that mindset. Before I interrupted you, you talked about number one, planting our flag in the Web3 environments. I think you've gone on to elaborate with the right mindset. What are thoughts 2 through 5? I'm curious.
So the second step, I would say, is to build an audience, right? You're doing the same thing. This is the heavy lifting of bringing value to folks on a regular basis. But you have to build the audience on a digital channel first, and that could be the old world of social media, Web 2, or like you're leading the way here, Mitch, moving it forward into the non-Web 2 world, right? That could also be outside the regular social media. It could be a newsletter, a podcast. It could be anything where people can get together and be part of something bigger. So you need to build an audience by planting the flag and attracting them to your thing, whatever it might be. So insights on marketing in Web3, legal aspects of Web3. It could be anything, but you need to be a regular contributor, creator. We'll call it a content creator. I hate that term because it seems so artsy, but you basically want to be able to deliver news, tips, insights. Your perspective even is worthwhile. The idea is to serve, not sell. If you're building an audience with the service mentality, people will come. And the funny thing about that is, as same with you, Mitch, people can tell right away if you're trying to sell them or you're trying to serve them. You physically stated a little while ago, we're not here to market and sell anything. I think that's dynamite. That's why it worked for you. So step 2 is to build the audience. Please.
All right, so building the audience, creating content, all in and with you on that. Maybe share your mindset on the type of content we should be creating. I've said in the past, I posted this yesterday. If you're creating the same content that everyone else is, the only thing you're guaranteeing is you're going to blend in. Share with us your thoughts on how we can create content in a Web3 world. And when I say Web3, I also want to include the metaverse. Those are the two things I'm really interested in. There's kind of a crossover there. What can we do when creating content to stand out, to be unique, to be memorable, and in fact, maybe even a little bit entertaining?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Information that's entertaining is always the first way to go. I'll give you an example. What are the problems that the people you're serving with this content face? Whatever they're thinking about around their kitchen table at night in their head, that's what the content should be about. So you want to address what's going on, trends in the industry, perspectives they might not see, connect dots for people. It's not about giving them the news. In a Google world, information is useless. But insight, that's very valuable and always will be. So in my old world of stock trading, I would call my clients and say, what are your biggest questions? When I heard a repeat question, that was my content piece for the week, and I would write something around that. Your Bill had asked me last time around with our conversation, what were some of the things we could do for our customers in the legal world? Maybe I wouldn't call it discounting services. You don't want that, but you want to give them some piece of value up front that's either informational or educational. Like in terms of what would they normally come to you for, put that into content. Ideally, and this is controversial, but I'm going to go with it, You want to make them educated enough that they never need to come to you for anything. Because the funny thing that happens from that is the law of reciprocity. When people know you know your stuff and they like you, they're going to want you to handle their business anyway. It's just the way humans work. So the content I would make, what is it that somebody would step back and say, that was really interesting, informative, and that involves perspective, not just information.
I love that. I love that. You know, the other element to what you just said is oftentimes you build trust by sharing and adding value, and then the client, at least in the legal profession, or if maybe in the metaverse world, building out venues, they're not going to want to do it themselves. You know, it's like, okay, I trust you. Now that you've laid out the A to Z, I'd like to have your firm or your company move forward with the project. And so you're right. You're not going in for the quick sell. You're going in for that relationship building opportunity where you build trust, and then they're ready to hand the ball off to you and score some touchdowns for them.
I know how accomplished you are in the legal space there, Mitch, and people aren't coming to you. Your clients and prospects aren't saying, what happened in the 1973 landmark case of such and such? They want to know, Mitch, what do you think about this? This is my situation. In you and your expertise, how would you guide me? And that is what content should be about. So, for example, in real life, Mitch, you write constantly about the metaverse. In fact, you just mentioned that there's a difference between the metaverse and Web3. These nuances, most folks don't know, and they want to. I mean, the crowd that you're attracting would definitely want to. So write the content or and it doesn't need to be writing, but make content around, these are the things that I think about it. You asked me earlier about FTX and Binance, the situation in the crypto world. We won't get into it, but I look at it in my perspective that I shared on Twitter was, you have a large company which is going to dump the holdings of the smaller company who's their main rival. When that main rival's price drops, the larger company buys them up. So to me, that's fishy. It's allowed in the law in the world of crypto. But my point is, I could be right, I could be wrong. It doesn't matter. It matters that I have an opinion, and people that are in that space know my positioning on it, that I have a thought on the matter. Years ago, I was asked by a competitor to lunch. They buy me lunch on Wall Street to ask me my opinion about a hire they were thinking. I was nobody other than a competing salesperson out there. But the fact is, I'd written hundreds of articles about this space, and they knew I knew it. So everyone should be the voice of their industry. You don't have to be famous, but you have to be that if I go back and look at your body of work, I can see that you know what you're talking about. Mitch, you illustrate this brilliantly, even right now.
Oh, thank you, Marc. Yeah, so it's a matter of getting started, right? You just have to start. And I want to circle back to, and thank you for the kind words. You guys, this is not why I asked Marc here, but I do appreciate the kind words. It's you know what's interesting, Marc, is I actually feel the same way. I'm going to say with about 90% of the people in this new community. They've moved over. I know who they are. They're all long-term friends of mine, at least 90% of them. And I feel the same way about them. And I'm excited for everyone to get to know each other better. It's going to be pretty cool. But it revolves back to the first step you said, plant your flag. For example, if I'm going to start building a brand and transitioning a part of my practice and maybe even my consulting agency with Garrett into a Web3 and metaverse space, guess what? I better plant my flag in one of these spaces. I need to walk my talk. Even though I've got a huge Web2 brand that's global, you know what? I am more interested right now in Web3 for all the reasons in my article. So you got to plant that flag in the Web3 and metaverse spaces. Number two, build an audience. It's, bringing your audience into where you've planted your flag through invitations, through personal conversations, through phone calls, through emails, through videos. It takes a while. It takes time. It doesn't just happen in a couple of days, but it's kind of a fun journey. And that's why I gave myself 60 days all the way up through January 1st, 2023 to make this transition. I want it to be easy for everyone. I don't want them to not know how to stay in contact, but I'm also going to walk my talk. And on January 1st, this is where my flag's going to be planted in 99% of my time. But number three, Mark, we're on step three of 5 ways to build our brand to build better relationships in Web3. What's step three?
So step three is going to be, since it's Web3, inevitably it becomes token integration, right? We don't have to do this now, but realize that if you're building a community, there's usually some sort of a token or at least some home base of operations, if you will, where the community can get together. You've done this with the Discord here, Mitch, right? You have created a place, literally a virtual place. And I know you do the coffees. I know you do this a lot. You've got experience in just putting people together in a room, physical or literal or digital, and let them interact and engage. That's where this is actually, believe it or not, where a lot of your content will come from. The concept of creating content, it doesn't have to all be from you, right? You can, what we're doing here now, Mitch. I mean, I'm a member of your community. I'm a friend, and I'm a big fan. And frankly, I'm a beneficiary of the knowledge you're bringing out. So I'm more than happy to take part. And I think a lot of people underestimate the value of the community in creating value inside the community. So that would be things like, I know at the Tilt, they have newsletter article submissions or, collaborations of types, podcast interviews. These types of things uncover a lot of value for folks who maybe weren't at the same level you are. And the cross-pollination, if you will, there's value there. So token integration can be one. It doesn't need to be one. I would say that's a step if you're really looking to build a long-term community in the Web3 world. If nothing else, you do need a place. Discord's a good one where people can gather. So that's step three. Step four, I would say, is creative value.
Mark,
Yeah.
Sorry about that. That was my bad, everybody. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I have different screens running and, still trying to find the mute and unmute button. And I want everyone else to play around. Whenever you're with me in Discord, and if you're new to Discord, feel free to play around with the buttons. If you pop into the show, no one's going to get mad. We're all figuring this out together. You mentioned tokenization, Mark. I know what you're talking about, but what can you explain maybe for those in the audience that aren't familiar with tokenization or listening to the recorded show? What are you talking about? What does it mean? And what are some different real world utility approaches to doing so to help build our Web3 and metaverse spaces?
Sure. So tokenization is basically an NFT strategy. You would issue a digital piece of code, software, to people that acts as tickets to entry to things like events. It can be access to you, the founder, or other people inside the group, more elite versions of the group. It can access things like content, specialized content, swag, anything that you can put together that might be of value to the group. These become the tickets to it, if you will, or the access points. That's popular uses of NFTs inside the Web3 world, but that's not the only limitation. Right now, Mitch, I wrote a piece a while back, 9 use cases that there are restaurants where you cannot get into the restaurant unless you are a member, if you will, of the restaurant via this digital token. So a token, this tokenized or coins, they're sometimes called, and that's actually a misnomer, but the point is they're membership cards, no different from your country club, your airline miles. People are familiar with coffee clubs and Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts, that. So you want to create a community, and they usually have some sort of a hallmark token that the community uses inside that community. And when I say currency, it's the wrong term, but that's basically a representation of value. So, for example, I had written a Web3 training course for Joe Polizzi's community, and Joe gave me a bunch of tokens. For whatever that means, good or bad, this is what people will do, things as a group to help educate the group, to help create events, experiences, as I said. The concept behind Web3 is community. Whatever builds community is of value. And tokens are one way to tie that community together. Again, you're not beheld to this. It doesn't mean that you need to do a token, but it's usually the next phase after people create a place. So, token integration. Go ahead.
Critically important too. I mean, let me double down on that, Mark. And Gina Carr just joined us. We met Gina at the CEX event also, and she and Terry, her fiance, are diving in headfirst into Web3. So Gina, it's good to see you here. What's interesting, Mark, is I watched a Gary Vee video that dropped yesterday on his take on the future of NFTs. And without exception, without any hesitation, what Gary was talking about, and for those of you that don't know Gary, go ahead and Google him. My son just started working for his LA office at VaynerMedia a month ago. But what Gary was basically saying is he explained his mindset on creating the utilities and how critically important it is to do what Marc just shared. I'll just leave it at that. So double down on adding value, backstage access, new discounts, access to products and services through your tokens, whether they're NFTs or some other type of digital asset. I'll share with everyone that's kind enough to be here today, Marc, and feel free to run with it, everyone. After listening to Gary's chat last night, I thought to myself, why not put together something like an American Express Black or Platinum card as an NFT? And when somebody purchases it, they get an hour of my legal time. They get an hour of a very well-respected CPA in the Web3 world. They get an hour of someone like Marc when it comes to finance and everything we're talking about today. You could literally incorporate an hour of 10 or 20 different experts' time within an NFT, package it, and make it available to your community for X amount of dollars or Bitcoin or Ethereum, along with access to next year's event and the year thereafter, like Gary is with VCon. I think that's something that we'll probably be doing, Marc. Have you given any thought to, leveraging the tokenization of NFTs with respect to anything that I just shared?
Yeah, I think that, Mitch, you just nailed that. Step 4, create a value ladder. You have mapped out buckets of value that people can leverage. And these are things that this isn't like a gimmick to get them to buy stuff. This is a reward for being part of the community and things that you are willing to share with them that they would be very, happy to have. I think that this is the concept of creating these buckets of value for community members. Typically, events for sure. I mean, that's the main use case right now has been events and access. You guys may know this. Tough Mudder, Spartan Races just has a 3-year access to their events now. You can buy a token, and it'll let you go to, I think, 400 different races around the world. Traditionally, you would have needed to register for each event, like a marathon or whatever it may be. But here, you have access to anything that's pre-approved, if you will, for 3 years, and that's a very valuable benefit to people in that community. Starbucks is doing the same thing with their with the coffee card. So some of the things people generally use in the value ladder, and these are ideas for the group here, swag, right? Joe has introduced coffee cups and T-shirts, and it's low-end stuff, but it's something. Coursework, training people with free access to courses that would really help them in their business. Group discussions, things like you're doing here, Mitch, or even a senior group discussion. So only select members of that group, and you can parse that any way you like. But let's just say, what if you could LinkedIn connect with only CEOs of Fortune 500 companies? Would that be worth something to you? That concept, direct access to the founder. Mitch, you just mentioned that. If an hour of your time is incredibly valuable. And think about it, like I would rather have, depending on where I live and what my situation is, I'd rather have Mitch's input than 1,000 kids that just came out of law school. Because frankly, it's not of any value to me. But what you've done, seen, and accomplished, Mitch, puts you in a category where your hour's worth of time, to me, it's priceless. And I will do things for that. I would be happy to support the community. I would do the things that would help build a collective value for the group. And then, of course, mentoring, events, all kinds of things. But you can ladder it up from the small thing like a coffee cup up to your time, Mitch. I mean, think about it. How many people would love to get an hour to just chat with you over a dinner or whatnot about something that really could impact their lives financially or otherwise? So that's the kind of thing where once you map it, and I do mean pen and paper, you write down what are the questions, problems, complaints, the things your customers come to you with, and organize that into a priority structure. Think about a pyramid. And just say, okay, how do I turn these into benefits that I can deliver through the NFT setups? Or It doesn't have to be an NFT again. There doesn't need to be a coin here, but you do need to prioritize what I'm delivering as a community to the people who are part of it. It's a reward system.
I
So that's
saw a friend of mine refer to it as like a digital membership card that
bingo.
they distribute on OpenSea, and so they're avoiding terminology that maybe doesn't favorably come across with some with some individuals, and everybody knows what a membership card is. And Mark, it's interesting. You said something about LinkedIn. We all have different connections in this world, and for example, for me to have access with 10 of your who are your friends who I've never met before, but I read about them in magazines or I listen to them on television. If I could pick their brains for an hour via the purchase of a single digital token that gives me access over the next 12 months to, the 10 people indicated in that particular NFT drop, what is that worth? Is that worth, $500, $500,000? I don't know. But that's the way I'm looking at this type of technology, and I know you are too. Mark and I, the reason Mark's here is we're not looking at Bored Apes or CryptoPunks as being the end all to this technology. In fact, we're at the other end of the spectrum, trying to appreciate the power of the blockchain and smart contracts and tokenized NFT digital technologies along with metaverse to move forward. And Mark, you talked about number one, planting your flag. Number two, building an audience. Number three, tokenizing all of the above and what we're doing. Number four, what was number four? Paraphrase it for me because I don't think I wrote it down.
Create a value ladder is what I like to call it as.
A ladder, like you climb up a ladder?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
You would organize the priority of what benefits you're delivering.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. And number five.
Number five would be to incorporate your community into the content process, which we referenced earlier. So I am going to actually make the community better by tapping the value of the community. And Mitch, you just said LinkedIn as an example. If I spend 30 years on Wall Street, New York City trading, which I did, most of my connections by virtue of my time there and just who I've engaged with for business, they're all going to be CEOs of hedge funds and publicly traded companies. And that's not a brag. I have no hooks in the legal community. But I know you do, Mitch. I know by virtue of your career, lengthy and distinguished in California, you've got quite a burnished LinkedIn profile connections, I'm sure. So how do we leverage each of those for each other? And the answer is by asking people to have conversations like this. Mitch, this is a meta example of illustrating how to bring value to a community with the community itself. So that's a step. I call it incorporating your community, but that is step number five. You're not just there to sell stuff, as you said. You're there to reward people for being members, and you're there to create new value with them. And in return for that, they will grow the community all by themselves because they are invested in its success. They're part of it. And so this is a self-perpetuating dynamic. None of this exists in Web 2. None of this exists in the traditional world of sales and marketing that we've always known. So what instead we have here is a growing relationship-based, value-oriented group of individuals who are committed. It's fascinating, really. We've never seen this before. We've come so far from the 30 seconds, sell my can of soda on television. So business will henceforth always revolve around relationships in a socially connected world through the internet, social channels, whatever you want to call it. Nobody does business without first knowing who these people are. None of us. At the very least, before you hire someone, before you do a big business deal, you're looking them up on Google and on social. And so, in a relationship-based world, how do you build business? That's the answer. Relationships. And so the Web3 ethos, I love it, Mitch, because I spent all those years social selling on Wall Street, a lot of companies, but there's only so many big ones. And so it's the same set of clients over all those years. And I learned, as you did too, Mitch, you get more through the relationships than you ever will through anything you know or how important you think you are. It's that people want to be part of what you're doing and support you because they agree with you and believe in you, and vice versa. So, Mitch, I never worked in the legal world, but I would jump through hoops of fire for you because I know you and I are cut from the same cloth.
We are. And that's why when we were walking back up to the hotel room, I told you, Lisa and Garrett, like, did you guys meet Mark? He's like, he was one of the most interesting guys we met down there. They just loved you, Mark. And
Oh,
you're
thank you.
just, your enthusiasm and excitement is contagious, right? And you back it up with your knowledge. Travis, it's good to see you here. Travis is a long-time friend of mine, one of Utah's finest lawyers, and he's heard me say over and over and over again that social media platforms, digital platforms come and go, but relationships will last a lifetime. And I think what's kind of exciting for me, and Gina, I saw your message over in the chat. We're going to open this up in a few minutes. I'm on board with everything you just mentioned in the chat. There's a chat group top right on my desktop. If you click the little chat button, everybody, you can chat publicly, you can message each other, you can tag people. So feel free to do so. But we're going to unmute the mics in a few minutes and talk more about what Mark has shared with us today, and also do a general Q&A about Discord. Mark, you don't have to stick around if you don't want to, but I have friends that have questions about how to use this platform. But Mark, back to your last point, I think what's really important to me is I'm just at the point in my career, in my life, I don't need anybody's approval. I only do what I want to do, and that's just the way I roll. What I've noticed on social media, the traditional Web2 platforms, is they've gotten so damn noisy, so damn nasty. They've gotten to the point where, whether the consumer realizes it or not, and I've got clients in the space, so I know exactly what's going on. The direction, the corporate-driven algorithms as programmed by the AI, the end result is to manipulate and maximize end of year profits for shareholders. I get all that, right? But having said all that, there's some amazing people in Web2 whose voices aren't being heard. They'll share a post and all that's happening, are digital crickets. I see friends of mine that are more gifted and have more to say than the top influencers on social, but nobody's listening. And that's the problem I'm seeing right now with Web2. Even when they post all the time and they're creating their content the same way, it's just not being amplified. And what I see happening right now with Web3, starting here with Discord, which I know is a Web2 platform, but with Web3, like we talked about with the metaverse, listen to the recording, everyone, if you're just coming in, is the ability to really shine a bright light on amazing people, to have them come in and actually be early into the space, which will allow them to be heard. It will allow them to build their brands. And Mark, I'm going to ask you to comment on this because I think it's a really good idea. It's not my idea. It's something that someone shared with me earlier this week, and that is reducing the friction and making it easier for our mutual friends to do everything we just talked about. So for a lot of people, Discord's kind of challenging, right? And all it takes is 20 or 30 minutes. And once you figure it out, like I said, it's my favorite platform right now for all of the reasons we discussed. But I'm going to be doing what are called challenges each week in Discord. And this isn't my idea. I picked this up from someone else earlier this week. So what I'm going to do, Mark, is once a week, I'm going to set 45 minutes aside, and I'm going to have a live video. And for my first challenge, it's going to be, probably like how to use Discord or how to use Web3 in the metaverse. The first 45 minutes will be, maybe sharing the mindset of Web3, the mindset of Discord. And hey, Adam, it's good to see you. We have one of the world's most renowned plastic surgeons joining us from Florida or wherever he's traveling from. It's good to see you. The first week will be mindsets. The second will be how to use Discord. The third week might roll over to the metaverse. The fourth week, how to use the metaverse correctly and communicate efficiently on the metaverse. Number 5, the fifth week might be what platforms we're recommending. So we want to take our mutual community, Mark, by the hand and reduce the friction and just bring them in, get them comfortable in this conversation and on these new platforms. Because for me, it's the friction which is keeping a lot of our mutual friends from really appreciating the value of what you just shared with the community. Your thoughts, your approaches, and hey, Adam, it's good to see you. You're more than welcome to join us by video. We are audio, but everybody say hi to Adam. It's good to see him. He's got some amazing platforms on spatial. But Mark, talk to us a little bit about reducing the friction. Have you used the challenge approach to make it easy to bring people into your new environments or into your new approaches to finance? And what will you be doing moving forward to make all of this easier for
That's
your family and your friends?
That's great, Mitch. First of all, I applaud you. I love what you're doing. Reducing friction has been the name of the game the last few years now, and I think that there's not enough of that going on. So if you're going to be the guinea pig and show us how to do this one step at a time, I think you're going to get a lot of followers and people who are going to jump on board and say, "Let me help you do this." The concept of reducing friction, 100%. I think that the example of that is right now. Right, you're doing this as an audio only. People are familiar with Clubhouse. It's similar enough. We'll give it a shot, right? People drop in and see just to see what it is. And I think the concept of growing the audience through education, you already know I'm a fan of that. I think that the number one thing we can do is bring a little value with each piece of content. And when I say a piece of content, I include this event. There's always a purpose, and it shouldn't be to sell stuff. At least that's not my intent, nor yours, Mitch, I know. And so I think when people recognize the intent, that becomes the connective tissue, right? That's again where I'll jump through hoops for you, Mitch, because I know what you're about, and vice versa. So to answer your question, I'm in the process right now of launching two things. One is a weekly newsletter, and two is going to be a weekly podcast. I'll have these up in about 3 or 4 weeks right now, but they're going to be around um, building community, if you will. It's not, I can't call it marketing because I despise that term. Like the whole concept of funnels is offensive to me because I'm not a marketing guy. I'm social selling will call me by trade. But the whole idea of how do you do business the right way in the modern world, in a world of connectivity like this, you have to change. You have to change your mindset. You have to change your approach. Mitch, you're illustrating it perfectly. But most people are still trying to issue NFTs with, llamas on them and make a buck. If you look at the recent history in the NFT world, the quote unquote business that's happening in Web3, Disney, Warner Brothers, they're all issuing short term things that they're selling tickets and whatnot in the NFT form, but there's no real value ladder behind it. This is the utility conversation. So I think that what you're doing with a weekly challenge, educating people, bringing them along, letting them know that it's okay, and sharing your stumbles. For those of you who may remember, one of the earlier podcasters was Pat Flynn, Smart Passive Income. I don't know him. I'm a fan. He was freely sharing how much money he was making from sponsorships, all the difficulties he had with the equipment. And this is maybe 15 years ago. Opened up the doorway for a lot. He's a legend now because of that. And Mitch, I think you're doing the same model here. This is a new space. It's Web3 is very confusing to a lot of people. The metaverse, is it even real? Is there just one? Like people don't know all these ins and outs, and you do. And so helping them along to see the things to see around corners, as we say, I think that that's what builds loyalty, friendships, community. And I'm a big fan of what you're doing here. I'm looking forward to where it goes.
I love that. And thank you, Mark. And so we're going to be unmuting and asking everyone to jump in and participate in the conversation. And we can go a different direction. How do you use Discord? What's your biggest challenge? What are you working on? But Mark, before we do that, a couple of things. You mentioned your newsletter and podcast. Write these down. I'm going to ask you three things. Number one, how can we stay in touch with you and where can we look at this stuff? Number two, oh man, I had a great question. I was going to mention, I think you're friends with, or David Bianchi, who's a friend of mine. And for those of you that don't know David, follow him. But he is a actor in Hollywood, has been on some big shows. He's got a new series coming out called Razor, where he's the lead actor in a future dystopian metaverse Web3 world. And it's fascinating, and it's got a major Web3 component, everyone, as far as watching the videos, etc. Having said that, yesterday I tried to log into the website, purchase some interest in the NFT aspect of what they're doing before the first drop. And like you talked about, Mark, the friction, even for someone like me that's pretty comfortable with all of this, we have a long ways to go to keep it simple as far as using different wallets, right? As far as using different digital currency. And so the point I'm trying to make, and I think David would be the first to admit this, and I'm an advisor on one of his companies, and I'm going to talk to him later today about this, is we want to make sure that if we're asking people to come in and do something, and it's a new sandbox that they're playing in, we want to list using Web 2 approaches, maybe an itemized bullet point list at the website. Number 1, do this. Number 2, do this. Number 3, do this. Keep it really simple, because you can't assume that everyone understands the way they connect with you and unlock access to what you're offering is by connecting their MetaMask wallet or their other third-party digital wallet to your Web3 site. If you assume that, you're probably going to be losing business, because a lot of people either don't know that or they haven't figured it out. So I think we need to really, keep it simple, stupid, right? Especially for stupid people like me. You've got to just lay it out, A, B, C, D, and E, I think, in the Web3 platform, so everybody doesn't get sidetracked with Monday Night Football instead of really going in and investing in your product or service. So let's keep it real simple before we open this up. How can we stay connected with you? How can we connect with your podcast and your newsletter, and then run through the 5 steps one more time for those members that joined late?
Sure. So number 1, the best way to stay in touch with me, believe it or not, Discord. I'm on here all the time. Probably LinkedIn is my number 1 channel just because of my background. But I'm Marc Angelos NYC on any of the socials. And if you guys want to find me, you'll find me. Number 2, I think that the whole concept, Mitch, about reducing friction, I just want to add to what you said. Nothing's different in the world of people and business. There's just a new technology in town, but the principles stay the same. So I want everyone to think about whatever you're putting out there. It's going to be similar, but different. It's the same concept of know, like, and trust. But instead of doing it in person over dinner, we're doing it through digital channels like this. So when it comes to reducing friction, think to yourself, how do I put whatever my thing is through the prism of what it used to be? And tell people, well, the way you used to have a regular wallet, now you have a digital wallet. Okay, I understand that. And here's the steps to take. Once you contextualize it first, then they'll do the steps. So that's the number 2. And the third thing, Mitch, is I forgot what you asked me, but I'm on board with wherever you go with this, because I think using Discord is very interesting. It's definitely become the platform. Discord, or maybe Twitter. I know that's a firefight right now, but there's not a really great place outside of Discord for people to talk safely and have community building.
So while people are unmuting, Marc, what I would love to have you do is just run through the 5 steps that you shared today. Number 1, plant your flag, and I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, of course. So the 5 steps to quote unquote market in Web3, and I can't stand that term, is 1, plant your flag, right? Become known as an expert in something specific. Number 2, build an audience. Pick your channel. Doesn't matter if it's newsletter, podcast, Discord. I don't care, but pick your place and start building an audience there by serving them. Number 3, integration of token if and when the time is right. That would be a Web3 tokenization is basically issuing NFTs as a membership country club kind of thing. Number 4 is create the value ladder. Build the buckets of value for the community members inside that community. Swag, group discussions, direct access to the founder, events. These are things that are valuable to that group, and you just have to prioritize them. And number 5, incorporate your community into the content process. Mitch, you're doing this right now. Figure out how to make these people showcase your people to your people. Because what ends up happening is it's a community, not just a cult of personality. I think if people can help build other people inside that community, it grows faster. And that inevitably leads to things like community get-togethers, in-person networking. All of that bit comes off the back of the community feeling like they're part of something. So those are the 5 steps. I think that any version of that will be successful because people want to be part of something. And so build it for them. Help them.
Thank you, Marc. You are awesome. This has been so much fun, everyone. And Marc, I always appreciate your time, your wisdom, your value, and what you're sharing. And if you don't mind, make a note to please share the post that you penned regarding, how companies are actually using NFTs tokenizing the power of NFTs. If you could share that in our channel, maybe the Your Projects channel. I'll probably reword that, everyone. We're still playing around with our channel titles because I want everyone here to share their favorite links, to share their upcoming projects, to share, we all write or create a video or a podcast episode that kind of like, oh, that was extra special. That one kind of jumped out. And I want people to share their projects, their articles, their posts here in the Discord. So Marc, if you could do that, I'd really, really appreciate it, because Adam, who is here, mentioned over in the chat how they're already also using NFTs. And Adam, when you see Marc's article, your eyes are going to light up because it's that good. So Marc, if you could do that, that'd be fantastic.
I'd be honored, Mitch. And thank you for having me. It was really a pleasure.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So what I want to do is, Marc, if you can stick around, great. If not, I understand we're in different time zones, but definitely everyone unmute, say hi. Gina, it's good to see you. And yes, this is the same Marc that you met over at CEX. Gina,